part of that is also just like remembering that you have the responsibility of carrying on the legacy of those who have built this thing, right? I guess just keeping that in mind, that anything you do is following on the footsteps of others and kind of building on their shoulders.
And welcome back. We have Vivek Gowri joining Long Run Labs today. Vivek was a guest on For the Long Run back in August and is making his return in perhaps the fastest turnaround of anyone besides David Roche for episode 2 on the podcast. So Vivek, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Back in August, we talked on For the Long Run about running in the Bay Area, running representation in trail running more broadly. And you kind of teased buying a running store as part of that. In this episode of Long Run Labs, we're going to talk more about buying that running store, what that means for the Bay Area running community, and ways that running retail can modernize in 2026 and going forward. And I'm sure we'll talk tech and quite a bit more as well. But Vivek, welcome back. And as you know, first question is a doozy. Who is Vivek?
So, in terms of who I am, I'm someone that's been a part of the Bay Area running community for probably a decade now in some form or fashion. I'm somebody that works in the tech hardware space and have been in that world for the last couple of decades as well. And I don't know, I'm just me.
A guy that likes to run and likes to run with friends.
Yes. Always run with friends.
Always run with friends. It definitely makes it easier, that's for sure. As I was saying, we talked at length about you and your running journey on For the Long Run, which again, you can scroll back to August. I guess let's dive into an abridged version of that story here. How did running find you? I
started doing a workout group in San Francisco shortly after I moved called November Project. I think there's a lot of us, I think John, you as well, had kind of found running through that. I think that's how we met, a decade plus ago. And the November Project at that time had a pretty core identity of running, right? It was a lot of circuit workouts, but a lot of the people that were involved in leadership and were showing up were like runners at their heart, right? The leader of San Francisco, I think, ran track at Northeastern and so on and so forth, right? So I found myself running with them, almost like this pipeline, right? You show up at 6:30 in the morning, do workouts, and then somebody is like, hey, let's sign up for a race, right? And then it's, let's sign up for a longer race. Let's sign up for a trail race. Let's sign up for an ultra, right? And you almost get sucked in because the energy around it is infectious. And through that, you start running with other groups, you start running with trail groups. And somewhere along that path, I found myself at San Francisco Running Company, which is a store in Mill Valley that is based, right off of the Headlands Trail System and hosts, weekly group runs in the Headlands, right? Start and end at the store at 8 a.m. on any Saturday. And that was kind of how I found myself in the trail running world, right? It was show up, make friends, get lost on the trails, get lost in the woods, get better at it. It's always hard. It, never gets easier, but you just have fun doing it, right? And I guess that kind of fast forwards us to today where, John, I think you were teasing it a little bit in the beginning, but I am taking over as owner of San Francisco Running Company at the beginning of 2026.
That is a big undertaking, and it's been something you've been thinking about for a while. At what point did the thought cross your mind of like, hey, this is something I want to do, and why?
Yeah, it's interesting because I, at the beginning of the year, did not really have it on my bingo card, right? I think over the last couple of years, various friends, it always just comes up in conversation, right? Like, oh, if, what would be cool is if SFRC did this, or if we owned SFRC, we would do this. And I think part of this is the community around San Francisco Running Company it's vibrant, it's engaged. People really care about the store and what the store does and how they engage with it. At some point, I was feeling a little bit burned out at work. And I kind of had the thought of like, it would be nice to spend my time and energy on things that I care about outside of work, right? Like, obviously, I'm super passionate about what I do for my day-to-day 9 to 5, but outside of that, it would be good if I could spend like that excess time and energy on like things and communities that I am passionate about. And so that led to a conversation with Ted, who's the current, now prior owner of San Francisco Running Company. And we chatted, and it actually lined up really well in terms of what his journey in the running space is and what he was looking to get out of the store and what he was looking for in kind of the next owner of the store, right? Where it's less about running or owning a retail store and more about really being the next steward or custodian of the legacy and heritage of San Francisco Running Company, right? This store was started almost 15 years ago in the Bay by someone named Brett Rivers. And coming out of that has just been this incredible legacy of trail runners and communities that have been built within the Bay Area, right? So that's how I was looking at it. And I think, what I valued in the store community and how I was looking at taking the store forward lined up really well with what Ted kind of had envisioned as well. And so that's something that, we had been talking about it in the early part of the year, and over the course of the year kind of got more serious about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, people always like to say, if only I could do XYZ, then I would do this. And it's like, well, you're putting your money where your mouth is and actually executing against the, group chat conversations of, I would love to do this, I'd love to do that. And to your point, SFRC is a pillar in the running community in the Bay Area and broadly. Like, I have a hat that I bought from SFRC, I don't know, a decade ago. And in a handful of states across the country, somebody has made a comment on it outside of California. And it just says SFRC. I don't even think it says San Francisco Running Company. And so it's one of those, like, if you know, you know. And a lot of people know. And you and I both got into trail running through events that were in partnership with or shepherded by SFRC back in the mid 2010s, specifically around the North Face races and the cast and crew of, the Dylan Bowmans, the Alex Varners, all these people that are epic trail runners to this day, but really push things forward in the Bay Area and more broadly. And so it's really cool to see the next iteration of community and what that will look like. And community is a word that we throw around when we talk about the November Project community, the running community, the Bay Area community. I'm curious how you define community and how that influences how you're thinking about the store going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because the community around SFRC has changed pretty substantially over the years, right? The group that was showing up in 2015 is not the same as the group that is showing up today. Obviously, during the pandemic, everything kind of shut down, everything kind of came back, people have moved around and so on. And so it's interesting to see how the community today has gotten, let's call it more diverse and more accepting. There are more people of color, more women, more mixed paces, right? I think early on, San Francisco Running Company and the reputation around those group runs where everybody shows up to run super fast, right? And in fairness, like a bunch of the, diehard guys from that era were professional trail runners or at least sponsored trail runners or on the edge of that. You look at some of the Strava results from 2013, 2014, and they're doing workouts on these weekend runs. And also partially of the time, we didn't have GPS watches that had mapping. The cell service wasn't that great. The trail mapping wasn't that great. Like Strava was just getting off the ground. And so you had these like paper maps that you kind of had to print out. And then if you didn't really know your way around the trail system, you're like, correlating this soggy folded up map to whatever trailhead sign you were in front of, right? It's like, it's not the most approachable way because, you have been long dropped by these incredibly fast people and you're just trying to like find your way back. And now today, we have a much more, let's call it accessible and approachable set of distances that, people can load up on their phones or on their watches and kind of, depending on how they're feeling, have the day that they're looking for a little bit. And so that's something where I think that was done very intentionally and helped along by Ted and McKay and the group at the store today. And I think the goal is to kind of continue that, right? And I think I obviously care a lot about diversity in running and specifically in trail running and, bringing more people that look like me to the trails, right? And I think having the store be a platform for that and kind of leverage that with partnerships with other groups in the Bay and with, other friends to, a little bit just guilt them into to showing up, right? Like, hey, like I own the store now, so like please, like you really got to show up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I know it's early and I know you run in the afternoon, but like just show up kind of thing. So kind of pull those levers and kind of nudge the community a little bit more that direction, right? Understanding that trail running group in Mill Valley is never going to be the most diverse place, right? Like it's just,
Right.
you say it and you're like, okay, well, yeah, of course there's.
Yeah, but the Bay Area is a wildly diverse place, especially compared to like a place like Boulder, Colorado, where, as we were talking about in our previous podcast conversation, right? Like the people are there. It's about helping them feel like they belong on the trails, right?
Yeah. And, giving them a place to go, a place where they can feel welcome and a place where it is a bit more normal, right? And I look at the way, people like Victor at Renegade Running or Armando and Nth Degree Running Group, they honestly serve as an inspiration because they have done such a good job building those communities for runners of color and getting them to come out to races and to trail runs and any number of other events, right? And so they, serve a little bit as the inspiration and the template where I kind of want to take some of their lessons and some of their guidance in helping the store be another vector for that.
That's awesome. And I'm excited to see the implementation of what that looks like and then the influence on the greater running community more broadly around what the store looks like in 2026, right? You come at it from a background of hardware and technology, working at the biggest company in the world or the best at technology in the world. How do you infuse what you know? And you're a very critical thinker and smart and intelligent around a lot of different areas versus like there are people who are just product people and they know their lane. They are very good in their lane, but they don't know really anything outside of that lane. I feel like that's not describing you. You have many lanes. How do you take all of that knowledge and expertise to help modernize a store, a community, et cetera, heading into 2026?
I've always been a hardware guy. Like no matter what I've been into over the years, I've always been into the hardware way of it, right? Or found a way to be into the hardware of it. So when I was growing up, that was tennis rackets and tennis ball technology and all of that. And then, obviously cars have always been a huge part of my life, computer hardware, which, has started as a passion and kind of became my career. And so with running, it was shoes. And then with trail running, you have all of the rest of the gear. Right. It's a little ironic because I'm a pretty minimal runner. I try to carry
You don't even use a shirt.
Possible. Yeah, no shirts, no vests. Belts are, I'm borderline on, like it's just a step too far. Just give me a handheld and we'll roll. But that was the other part of the store that was interesting, right? Because you get to be a part of the hardware side of the industry. And yes, you are, let's call it further down the customer experience chain, right? Where you're the direct customer facing sales operation as opposed to the product development side of it. But that gives you a really interesting place to do things like marketing activations and voice of customer activities and things like that, right? So I have always liked that. I've always been very passionate about, the consumer experience, right? I have a long-standing consumer hardware background, whether that was on the press side or the product development side. And so this feels a little bit like this is the retail side of that in a slightly different space, but not totally dissimilar. I think coming into it in 2026, right, the store is in a really good place, right? It's a robust business. I think all running specialty stores, or a vast majority of them, had a very tough time early in the pandemic. And certainly I think SFRC was no different. The world shut down, everybody's doing everything online, group runs aren't happening, right? And so all of a sudden you lose a lot of your customer base and you lose a lot of your community. Over the last 5 years, I think, Ted and the team that he has built have really done an incredible job, one, keeping the lights on, but then building SFRC back as a business to really where it was in its heyday under Brett before the pandemic. And kind of you look at that and the work they've done, and what you want to do is find ways to build on that, right? This is not something where it's like, okay, there are things to fix, right? There's a lot of, don't fix what isn't broken. Make sure that any change you make is iterative and positive. SFRC it's a little bit of a ship. And so steering it will need to happen gradually, right? You can't introduce significant supply shocks or experience shocks or really any of that. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think in the process of the sale or in preparation for the sale, just long-term vision-wise, there were a couple of big changes that were made. One was closing the San Anselmo store, right? So for the last 6 or 7 years, there have been 2 retail locations, right? There's the standard or original Mill Valley location right off the trailhead, and one that was further north in San Anselmo. I think Brett opened that in, let's call it 2018. Earlier this year, I would say like a couple of months ago, that location closed so that we could really focus on the Mill Valley location and kind of double down on that, focus our efforts there and building that store up a bit more. And as part of that, I think, going into next year, we'll look to improve kind of the e-commerce side of the business, right? I think we've had a small e-commerce platform for the last couple of years. We, significantly overhauled the website over the summer. And I think the goal into 2026 will be to build that out more. So more of the things that you see in the store will be available online, as opposed to now where it's very specific targeted items, right? That's how we're looking at it. We've also done things like, change the layout of the store inside, give it a more open space where people can hang out, right? It's much more of a gathering space. Philosophically, the store has always functioned as a bit of a gathering space, but the store layout inside itself has always been a bit more like a classic retail store, right? There's a lot of products on shelves. There's a lot of mobile shelving and retail units inside the store. And so there's not a ton of space to move around and things like that, right? Lots of racks and stuff. We've kind of moved a bunch of those out. And so they're the store just generally feels much more open. And so it'll be, changes like that, right? Pretty iterative, but hopefully ones that have, big experiential impacts, right? And so looking at what goes on the walls and what the decor is, right? Where you start changing around some of those things, right? Can we have more art from local friends and community members, photos that our friend Tony has taken. Shout out to race photographer Tony with the Sony.
It only took 23 minutes for Tony to show up in this podcast.
It was inevitable.
Bound to happen. So it brings up another point, right? You have a lot of friends in the space at brands, and I find, or athletes or content creators or whatnot, I find that as I've spent more time in the industry, people just love working with good people, right? And so you can call on Tony, you can call on David, you can call on Yuri and Celia at Goo, all these people that are either brands or creators or something, Patty as an athlete, all these people that make for a much more interesting experience than if you were only in it to running is booming. I want to sell a fuck ton of shoes and that's all I care about, right? So talk to me about the doubling down on the community, doubling down on the people and the vision around how do you, leverage is the wrong word because it feels transactional, but how do you incorporate all of these different players that you've come to know quite well, for some of them, or are roommates with or whatnot? How do you incorporate all these different moving parts? And is that a focus?
Yeah, it's definitely a focus in the sense of, we have a lot of friends who are doing incredible things in various parts of this space, right? And having the store as, kind of a touch point for all of that lets you build experiences and connections and work with people to amplify the interesting things that they are doing, right? Whether that's, somebody has a really cool new shoe launch, or you want to talk about some of the new technology that's coming in the cutting edge of shoes or certain parts of apparel or things like that. Or, a friend has written a book about diversity in the running space, right? And I think looking at the store as steward of trail running culture and not trying to maximize the revenue you get allows you to do kind of the right things for the right reasons, if you will, and not because you're trying to maximize the dollar per square foot of the store.
Now, do you think that every store owner can operate under that premise? And it's like a two-part question. One, do you think that doing the right things for the right reasons is a long-term approach to a healthy business? Or is this like you have an ability to like, this doesn't need to put food on your table and you can do the right thing because it's fun and it's great and it's a sandbox to create community and get more people into running, and like it doesn't need to maximize dollars in? Or do you think it's more of the former where like doing the right thing is also a healthy business decision? It might just take longer to facilitate.
Yeah, exactly. I think over the long term, if you do the right things for the right reasons, it will pay off, right? It's a little bit of play the game, not the scoreboard. Or that's one that my CEO loves to say, right? Like I've heard him say that in person and in interviews a good number of times, but play the game, not the scoreboard. That I think is how I approach building a business in general. But the flip side of that is most running stores, I think, have to, be able to keep the lights on. To do that, you sometimes do need to play the scoreboard, right? Like in the end, and you do need to be able to pay your employees, keep the lights on, make rent. Like these are real concerns. And so, I am fortunate that I don't have to worry about that as much, which I think lets me make different choices perhaps about, the products that we carry, why we carry them, the partnerships that we do, and how we approach that. And I don't think that it's radically different, but it changes some parts of it and lets you do things like, yeah, I want to build this partnership with X brand or X person because I value what they're doing. And I think it's important. And it's an important story to tell. And I would love to either elevate that or help them tell it and kind of look at it like that.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's like there aren't a lot of people in positions like you're in with an interest. There are a lot of people in the position you're in, but there aren't a lot of people with the interest in doing things the right way, or as you said, to like elevate people doing good things in the space. I'm publishing another Substack article on Friday of this week, so it'll be out by the time that this comes out, and we'll link to it in the show notes, but it's called Why Fit Compounds. And in it, I wrote about how there's so many opportunities to take like short wins at the sacrifice of long-term growth, success, trust, credibility, etc. And I reflected on how for the first 5+ years of hosting my podcast, I had the luxury and privilege of like saying no to anything I wanted from a brand partnership standpoint because it was not paying my bills. And it enabled me to be very particular with who I worked with, and I could do things that wouldn't make sense for other shows to do in platforming certain things at no cost or saying no to things that were at a high cost but low trust or credibility, like a quick buck. I don't see that as being the case for a lot of shows, and I get it, right? Like if that's how you put food on your table, which is what I'm doing now, you have to say yes sometimes, even if you don't fully believe in the thing or whatnot, if you simply don't have another choice. And so this is really the facilitation or the manifestation of that at a much broader scale, where if community or trust or a meeting place or whatever is the long-term through line, like you get to make some pretty fun decisions, hard decisions at some points too, I'm sure, but you get to make fun decisions like bringing certain people in to do things that like, it's not going to sell more shoes, but it's ultimately the right thing to push the community forward. I'm saying that because it's fun to platform that platform, but it's nice to see that these types of things are happening, in that like, if you're looking at ultimately what is best for the running community at large, it is something like this, where a person with influence and ability is able to steward a space and a community that ultimately benefits everyone that gets to interact with it.
Yeah. And I think part of that is also just like remembering that you have the responsibility of carrying on the legacy of those who have built this thing, right? From the Brett Rivers era to Ted, they have invested a lot of themselves in building the community around this store and the legacy around this store. And so I guess just keeping that in mind, that anything you do is following on the footsteps of others and kind of building on their shoulders.
Definitely. Going back to the tech piece and platforming things that you're interested in, you invested in Avello. I'm an advisor in Avello. Avello is making the world's smartest shoes. How do you think about something like that where like you have a vested interest in the success of that company that plays in the running space, and maybe there's interest in bringing it into the store in some capacity through group runs or discussions on technology and running? I don't know, like, is that a consideration that you've had before?
Yeah, it's something where, obviously you want to help amplify the things that you care about. With Avello, obviously I have a financial interest in it, but I think the technology is incredible. And I think the shoe and the product that they have put together is actually really compelling. So that has this kind of natural, I guess, crossover point where you could easily see, us using the store as a place for them to start building a retail network as they start expanding their distribution, right? I think it's a possibility. I don't think anything is set in stone from that standpoint, but you get the opportunity to take, I don't know if the word is bets, but take the opportunity to try new things, take a chance on new products or new companies, right? Small companies, and have the flexibility to work with brands that don't necessarily have distribution built out yet in a really formal way. And so I think that lets us stay on the cutting edge of trail running gear and culture, right? Because I don't think it's just about, the shoes or the latest phones or the latest whatever. I think there is a strong trail culture, right? Trail running culture, and a number of lifestyle brands and aesthetic that has popped up around that, right? And so we have the ability to lean into that as well. And so, obviously you have your established legacy brands that, people know and love and still making up the majority of your sales, but being able to help push trail culture forward in a very real local retail sense is always going to be a cool opportunity, especially in today's day and age where you have a lot of these new innovative brands that are constantly popping up and, making names, but don't necessarily have the same kind of reach of distribution.
Speaking of reach and distribution, how are you thinking about content as it relates to the store and the changing media landscape in 2026? Yeah, I'm curious how, will the store have a podcast? Will the store have a YouTube channel? How do you think about continuing to get out there and broadcasting the cool things that you guys are doing?
Yeah, that I'm still kind of piecing it together, right? Because the overhead associated with a podcast or a YouTube show is higher than I think we have the bandwidth for currently, right? And, I have at various points in my life tried to get one or both of those things off the ground and always just run into the, it's more work than I think I can devote to it. I think, our social media presence is much more robust than it was a couple of years ago. And I think continuing in that and kind of, keep building on the progress we've made there is important. I think we, can partner with podcasts like yourself or like Free Trail or, insert other, and kind of do that a little bit as our near term strategy from a podcasting standpoint or from a YouTube standpoint, whether that looks like we do a podcast with shoe review or something like that.
I mean, that's one that makes it such a no-brainer, right? For top of funnel and discovery. And, oh, by the way, we also sell the shoe. And, oh, by the way, if you don't live in San Francisco, we have an enhanced e-commerce experience now too.
Exactly. And so that, I think, is interesting. I think the other thing that I'm looking at as we build out a more robust online presence is how do you help bring people who aren't in Mill Valley to the store, right? Is that partner with groups in San Francisco and get them to come up to Mill Valley, do a run, spend time in the shop? Is it, look for people outside the Bay to use our store as an online store, right? Is it some combination of the two so that you can kind of expand the TAM, but do so in a way that's a little bit organic as opposed to, just start doing unnatural things that you wouldn't really do.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
One of my pie in the sky desires, things I want to see in the space. I spent a few weeks earlier this year pitching Fleet Feet on sponsoring trail runners, right? So similar to how the feed sponsors pro athletes and influencers so that they can choose any nutrition product that they want, why isn't Fleet Feet or Running USA or Zappos or SFRC or somebody sponsoring currently unsponsored by shoe brand athletes, so like a David Roche or someone like that, and letting them drive tons of traffic to the store and to the e-commerce experience as well? Like, is there an avenue where something like that makes sense? Is it just the economics doesn't make sense on something like that?
I think, at least from the standpoint of running retail, particularly like small scale local running retail, breaks down from a financial perspective, right? I think sponsorships a lot of times come out of a marketing budget, and it's the original kind of impression based marketing ad spend, right? And, this is if you were Nike and sponsoring a basketball player or a tennis player, right? It's very much based on impressions. And you have a huge ad budget or marketing budget to go chase this, right? And so, you look at a shoe brand and their marketing budget is measured in the millions to tens of millions. And so they have the ability to go pay a top tier athlete, deep 5 figures, low 6 figures to be a sponsored athlete. Most running retail stores don't have that kind of marketing budget, right? Like, your marketing budget is measured in the thousands, tens of thousands. Like, you don't have the scale to go drop $100,000 on sponsoring David Roche or whatever, right? Like, I'm throwing out numbers, but you get what I'm saying, right? That ends up being like some X factor of what your whole marketing spend for your store is. And that's tough, right? Like, that's a really tough space to walk into. Now, there's the flip side of that where, every local area has some incredibly talented runners that, perhaps don't have the social media profile or the national profile, international race profile to get a sponsorship from a brand. And I think within those communities, helping those athletes chase their running careers and supporting their success is a huge win for the store, right? But what you're spending for those is, you're not writing up a big deal. You're like just helping them on their, giving them shoes, giving them gear, giving them nutrition, just like helping them, putting them in touch with brands, putting them in touch with races, like stuff like that. Help their social media presence for the ones that don't, celebrate their wins, try to amplify those. But that's more like you are helping the deserving folks in your community grow, right? Or, pick your phrasing, but helping people on their running journey to hopefully getting sponsored by one of those big brands.
Let's talk about angel investing. It's a topic that's come up a handful of times on this show. It's something I've been participating in a little bit, certainly not at the same scale as some of the people I've been talking about it with, but it's a fun exercise on betting on people versus betting on a business plan, right? As more of a VC experience might be, or an existing business that's doing well and they need some more fuel on the fire. What's your experience with angel investing and why is it interesting to you?
I think the way I've always looked at it is you have to have a good product and people you trust, right? And it could be people that you're meeting, but you have to believe in them. And that's one where I think larger scale VC firms put money in founders, right? And it's a little bit of give them the money, let them cook. I think with smaller scale investing, and for me, like being a personal investor, spending my own money, I need to have a little bit of the product vision. And, and for I come from a very product centric background. And so believing in the product is also important, right? Where I need to believe in the product as well as the people behind it. But I think it's interesting because you are able to help people fulfill their visions, right? Make interesting things, make things that you think should exist, right? Avelo being a great example of this, where as somebody who's both very into running shoes and very into technology and having seen, smart devices do different things and fall short in different ways over the years for running, that was one where I wanted to see that product exist. And I got to kind of put my money where my mouth is a little bit and help make that happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially when you are finding opportunities that are like, oh, I want to be the customer of that thing that doesn't currently exist. I had a conversation with Sahil Bloom last week, in Boston, and he just launched a men's skincare brand. And Sahil has 1 million followers on each and every platform. And so a lot of the feedback after he launched on Twitter, where he got many millions of views on the launch tweet, it was like, oh, he's doing the classic build a platform, an audience and distribution, and then monetize the people that he's collected along the way. And he was like, nope, that's wrong. I just wanted the product. He's like, if I wanted to monetize my audience, I would have sold courses. And I don't want to sell courses, but that's how you make a ton of money as someone in his position. But it's not what he's interested in doing. He wanted to buy a specific skincare product and line for men, and it didn't exist, so he made it. And so I think there's a lot of you can care a lot more when you're building something for yourself or when you're helping to accelerate something that is what you want versus addressing a market opportunity or some business proposal that is like a smart business plan, but isn't something that's like bullseye to your lived thesis or like why you're interested in things. So yeah, it's been interesting to play in this space a little bit. I made a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago that was basically explaining the approach to it, which is like, again, betting on people. And ironically, I had a bunch of people reach out and they're like, hey, can you share my startup to your 15 people who are angel investing? I was like, did you read the post? This breaks the thesis of investing in people that I trust, right? Like you can't cold pitch a structure that's based on trust. So anyway, it's a fun space to be a part of and fun to have conversations and hear about how people are participating and on either side of the equation.
Yeah. And honestly, that's a lot of how I thought about product development as well. Like I built the laptops that I wanted to use. I built the set-top boxes or gaming devices that I wanted to use. So that philosophy really just migrated over to how I invest, right? And I think this is one where I'm investing in the things that I care about because I care about them and the people I care about because I care about them, not necessarily because, I think this is how I'm going to make whatever, $100 million off of Uber going to IPO, right? Like just, but I think that's why you're like, if you're investing at a large scale and you're trying to find the next, $100 billion exit, like it's not
the strategy.
It's different, right? Or like you approach that differently. The rationale you use behind investing looks very different. But, looking at how that applies to the running space and the outdoor space broadly, it lets you work with interesting founders that are building innovative products, right? And that I think is something that I don't take for granted because the innovation coming out of all corners, really, whether you're looking at the product side or the media side right now in the running space is immense. And so, as someone with the ability to amplifying that in the ways that you think are important is, I think, how I look at it.
So we both just went to TRE. You talked about a lot of the innovation in the space. Curious what's exciting you, what your predictions are for 2026. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think things that are interesting to me is that, at least within the trail space, I think people are getting a bit more focused, moving away from, every racing shoe is a plated shoe and more towards, you're going to see a shoe that's more suited to the mountains, right? Or racing in the mountains, and a shoe that's more suited to more desert races or flatter, less technical races, right? And that kind of gives you this like breadth of options that has existed, I think, in the road space for a while, but is only now something that the trail space is really starting to see. I think the other thing that really stood out to me is there's a lot of SKU proliferation where you have a lot of brands that are trying to fill every niche, and they're trying to fill every color niche, every product niche, even when the brands themselves don't really believe in the product that they're making. It's a bit of, we need to have a product in that space. And so it's there.
Is gravel and road to trail in that category, or do you think those are necessary spaces to play in?
I think it remains to be seen how much of a customer demand there is for it. There are some really great gravel shoes that have come out, and running in California trails, gravel shoes are honestly great. California carpet.
Great, yeah.
Exactly, right? You can get away with a road shoe for most headland, like dry headlands runs. you'd be totally fine in a pair of road shoes. And so gravel shoes, road to trail shoes are perfect. And they, I think, will do very well here. But I don't know if there's enough of a market there for every single brand to have a couple of different road to trail shoes, right? Maybe that just simplifies down to there's like less technical trail shoe and a more technical trail shoe, right? Like
3mm lugs or 2mm lugs.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can have a couple of different trail shoe lines and maybe one of them gets called gravel, but it's not the same. I don't know. You're not replacing whole new categories in that sense.
What are your thoughts on the international influence of shoe brands that have decided that the US is a interesting market? You look at Norda out of Canada, Mount to Coast out of China, Kip Run out of France, backed by Decathlon. These are companies with, many of them have very serious budgets, and they're not operating like startups in that they're not well capitalized. They are well capitalized. And I was just talking about this on the run yesterday. They're doing the right things with the money. They're sponsoring media, they're sponsoring athletes, they're sponsoring races. They're not just pouring it all into Meta and beating people over the head with ads. They're sponsoring people and content. So I'm curious your thoughts on something like that. And then as someone who is making buying decisions at the wholesale level, like how do you think about those types of brands?
The challenge with some of the smaller brands is at the local retail level, you need to do some customer education on what those brands are.
Yep.
Right? It's not just having a great product, it's having the story and the like local experience that you can kind of bring to your store, to your community with it. Because a great shoe on its own without anyone knowing what it is, you get this kind of, if a tree fell in the forest and no one, like, did it make a sound, right? And I think that's where, like, the few of the new names that you were mentioning, they are doing a bunch of those things on the kind of experience side to get the name out there, right? Where it's, you know, even if someone hasn't run in the shoes, it'll be like, oh yeah, I heard about them because of X, right? And X can't just be an Instagram ad. It, you know, there's certainly within the running and trail running space, there's a certain authenticity, right? Like, it just doesn't sound legit if you haven't seen it at a race or you haven't seen it on like a friend running in it, or
Kafuzi reviewing it, or David Lamb talking about it with the hand in front of the camera, you know, as we've grown accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, he's not allowed to talk about other shoes anymore.
That's a bummer because I've enjoyed his takes on shoes. So we'll have to slap him on the wrist for agreeing to that. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's like that social proof. The social proof is so essential in getting that buy-in. And the only way to do that is authentically working with people. And like, I had a conversation with a guy who's spending $1 million a month on Meta. And he's like, I need to work with creators so that when people see my ads, they're familiar with the brand and they're not just seeing ads. They're seeing people that are associated with the product and have familiarity with the use of it versus just, again, being beaten over the head with Meta ads, you know, 5 times a day.
Yeah. And, you know, to why international brands care about the US market, I think it is always that the US will be one of the tastemakers, right? You know, just look at where the 2 biggest trail races from a prestige standpoint at least are, right? One is UTMB in the Alps, and that, you know, that region will always be, call it, one of the hubs of trail running, right? A lot of shoe brands and shoe innovation design centers come out of Annecy, France, right? Just outside of Chamonix. And, you know, the other big event from that standpoint is Western States. And the other kind of big shoe innovation center is in Portland, or the Portland area, right? And then obviously, you know, you go over and on the factory side, you have China, where a lot of, let's call it, the factories, manufacturing innovations and supplier innovations are happening, right? And I think that's true both in the running space as well as, you know, this has been the story for technology for, you know, decades now.
Makes sense. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today? We had a pretty broad range of topics as is.
I don't think so. I think we touched on a lot. I'm happy to keep going.
Awesome. Well, all right. Dark horse prediction for Western States 2026 while we have you. What shoe brand will the winners be in, male and female?
Ooh, male, I would say normal. Not that much of a dark horse.
Okay, dark horse was the popular vote. The popular vote for shoe brand.
The popular vote, as in like who's going to have the most.
No, who do you think is going to win?
I mean, I think Killian's going to win.
Okay.
It's
All right. What about on the
thus
women's
normal
side?
for the shoe choice.
Yeah. What about the shoe choice on the women's side? Basically, I'm asking you, who do you think is making the best shoes right now, not who is the best athlete?
Oh, in that sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, you asked for, okay.
I didn't explain my question very well. The question is, what shoe do you think is best equipped to win that race?
I don't know. I mean, I think, honestly, Ultrafly 2 is going to be awesome. I'm actually really excited for that one to come in January. So that'll be the one.
I got to get my hands on one of those.
Yeah.
Awesome. Vivek, this has been a blast. Can't wait to see you out in the Bay Area soon, or you guys all have to come out to Boulder this winter and experience proper winter, although it's been warm here, so it's not very proper.
Yeah. Are you guys ever getting snow? It's like 70 degrees.
I'm looking at snow right now, actually. It's melted, but
wasn't it 70 degrees like last week?
Yes.
Okay.
So it goes.
Colorado's wild, man. It's just, I mean, it's just nice in San Francisco. It's like beautiful. The sun's out.
Don't go to San Francisco in July and you'll be all set.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Vivek, this has been a blast. Appreciate it.
Yep. See you, bud.
Bye.